Hello. Trash the train. Metrorail is a £100 million plan to reopen railway stations and railway lines around Bristol that were closed. In the 1960s, Richard Beeching was asked by the government to look at British railways and advise them on how they could be made profitable. His answer was simple: stop running trains that nobody's using. And that's basically what they did. The idea now is that if these are reopened, people will use them. But I'm not aware of any evidence that shows this is actually the case. Certainly, rail passengers have increased. But I think this is mainly due to increased traffic congestion and increased fuel prices, rather than any enthusiasm the public has for trains. It's also a fact that these stations are not spread evenly across Bristol, so they won't help everybody. And £100 million is quite a lot of money to spend unless you're sure it's going to work. There is one exception to this, and that's the Portishead Railway line, which I will talk about in another talk. The other scheme that I'm bothered about is the electrification of the main line from London Paddington to Bristol and Cardiff. The bill for this has now risen to £2.8 billion. That's a huge amount of money. It works out at about 17 or 18 million pounds per mile. Compare that to the cost of a new railway line. In Spain, they built a new high-speed railway line for €9.57 million per kilometre. Around about the same kind of money, I think. Why are we doing this? Well, Norman Baker told me that the advantage for him was that we would reduce CO2 emissions by 30%. I asked the Department of Transport how this was going to be achieved, and they told me it was because electric engines are lighter than diesel engines and they have regenerative braking. Well, I pointed out to them that the engines would not be lighter because they are not electrifying the line all the way to Swansea, and so the engines will have to have an electric motor and a diesel engine, and therefore won't be lighter. If anything, they'll be heavier. And they wrote back and agreed that this was correct, and that the saving would actually only be about 15% at best. Well, today in the Bristol Post it's announced that the government is going to have to spend another £330 million because the engines that they bought will have to have diesel engines added as they're only electric. I don't understand this. Somehow I think we're being taken for a ride somewhere, and I don't mean on a train. What actually is the benefit of electrifying the main line? Well, we're told that it will reduce the journey time from 1 hour 40 minutes to London to 1 hour 20 minutes. Who benefits from this? Well, they're saying commuters will benefit, and one estate agent has said that this will be really good for Bristol's housing market because it will increase prices by 5 and perhaps 10%. You see, people will be able to move from the home counties down here and get a much better house for their money. Well, if I was a young person trying to get on the housing ladder, I don't think I'd want anything that was going to raise house prices. In fact, I want quite the reverse. The people who are going to benefit from this scheme are obviously estate agents, builders, property developers, people who've been land banking, and of course the companies that have won the contracts to do £2.8 billion worth of work. But will it benefit you and me? Well, it won't benefit me. When I went to London recently, I was quoted £153 return. I can't possibly afford to pay that. I went up by National Express coach, which cost me £16 return. And I got a seat all the way. Of course, the railway enthusiasts will say that I could have got a cheaper fare if I'd shopped around. Well, I did. I pressed the button marked Find Cheapest Fare, and it quoted me just under £53 return. That's still 3 times the cost of going by coach. Well, what about the environmental benefits of this? It is going to reduce CO2 emissions, isn't it? Well, possibly. The enthusiasts tell us that trains are much better, much for travel. The only evidence I can find comes from a study by Arvad Horpeth and Michael Chester at the University of California in Berkeley. They show that trains are marginally better than aircraft for flying from city to city. But what it does also show is that when you take all the factors into consideration, and I stress that, all the factors, the best way to go from city to city from an environmental point of view is on a coach, providing it's full. The other thing that crosses my mind is, do we want to become a dormitory town for London? I mean, if that happens, it will mean that ordinary people who work in the city and live here will have to move further out and commute further in to work in, say, the BRI. Take the example of a nurse who works there. They're already working 12-hour shifts because that means they don't have to commute for so many days a week. Do we really want our people to be looked after by a nurse who spent 2 hours commuting, works a 12-hour shift, spends 2 hours commuting home again, and grabs a few hours sleep and then does it all again tomorrow? I don't think I do. I really don't think this is a very good idea. And there's one other factor to take into account. The price I quoted for the railway ticket. That isn't the true cost of going on the train. Railways are subsidised by £4,000 million a year. As far as I know, the coaches aren't subsidised at all and they make a profit. From an environmental point of view, railways are also not very good because they're having to cut back the foliage by 6.5 metres on each side of the line due to electrification. That's hardly good for wildlife. So I think this is another scheme that we really ought to take a good look at and think again before we go any further with it. Tomorrow's talk will be Curb the Cycle. If you like what you've heard today, or even if you don't, please tell your friends. And if you want to comment or ask a question, bishopstonbarry@uwclub.net. Bye.